Little black girl fixes a millionaire's car, but her pendant reveals a secret that shocks him. What if a 10-year-old girl with grease-stained fingers and a mysterious pendant held the key to exposing a billion-dollar secret? Meet Lena Carter, a gifted mechanic who thought she was just fixing a stranger's car, until her act of kindness unraveled a hidden empire built on exploiting children like her. Her journey from silence to justice will shake you, inspire you, and leave you breathless. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the 2. Follow more stories that move hearts and change lives. The summer sun burned hot and merciless over the rural Maryland road, making the air shimmer above the cracked asphalt. Dust rose with each soft footstep as Lena Carter, 10 years old and small for her age, trudged home from school. Her tattered backpack, stuffed with textbooks, wires, and a screwdriver kit, bounced lightly against her back. She wore her usual oversized denim jacket and a faded Future Engineer t-shirt that used to belong to her late adoptive mother, Nora. She had nearly reached the old water tower when she spotted it. A bright, cherry-red Mustang GT, hood popped like a gaping mouth, parked half off the road with smoke curling into the air. A man in a sleek navy suit paced in agitation beside it, phone pressed to his ear, voice rising like a kettle about to whistle. His tie had come loose, his collar was soaked with sweat, and his expensive Italian shoes were covered in roadside grime. "I don't care if it costs double. Just get someone out here. I've got a meeting with the senator in less than an hour," he barked into the phone before hurling a look at the sky as if blaming the sun itself. Lena's steps slowed. Aunt Carla always warned her not to approach strangers, especially rich-looking white men screaming at their phones. But curiosity beat caution today. The Mustang's hood was lifted just high enough to reveal the belly of the machine, and Lena couldn't help herself. Her fingers itched to touch the engine. Her Uncle Roy had once joked she was born with a wrench in one hand and a spark plug in the other. For Lena, machines spoke a language she understood better than people. She lingered by the edge of the road, trying to make out the problem from afar. The scent of burnt coolant wafted toward her, and her nose wrinkled. Her hand instinctively went to the small copper gear pendant she always wore, Nora's final gift. She fingered it as if it could make a decision for her. "Excuse me, sir?" she called out, stepping forward cautiously. The man spun around. His face was handsome, but pinched with irritation, his brow furrowed so deeply it could have swallowed his sunglasses. His eyes narrowed as they landed on Lena. Dark skin, messy braids, cracked sneakers, and eyes too curious for comfort. "I'm not giving you money," he said automatically, misreading her entirely. "I don't want money," Lena replied, standing her ground. "Looks like your coolant system's blown. I can help." He blinked, taken aback. "Help? You?" "Yeah," she said, letting her bag slip to the ground. "My Uncle Roy runs the only auto garage in town. He started teaching me when I was 6. You're not going to get a tow out here for another hour, at least. I can take a look, no charge." The man, Julian Reeves, CEO of Reeves Innovations and one of the most influential entrepreneurs on the East Coast, stared in disbelief. His day had already gone to hell, and now he was being offered roadside assistance by a child who looked like she couldn't even reach the pedals. But something in her tone, unshaken, calm, oddly professional, gave him pause. "I appreciate the offer, sweetheart," he said with strained politeness, "but this is a $90,000 high-performance car. It's not a toy." Lena just shrugged. "Neither's the truck I fixed last week. That thing was older than me and smelled like raccoons." Before he could stop her, she had already opened her backpack and pulled out a small metal case, her toolkit. She propped it open with practiced ease, revealing a custom collection of tools and wires, electrical tape, and a packet of coolant tablets she had begged Uncle Roy to order online. Julian watched, half annoyed, half intrigued, as Lena leaned over the engine, eyes scanning like a surgeon before an operation. "When did it start overheating?" she asked. Julian folded his arms. "About 30 minutes ago. Started with a weird hissing, then smoke, then it just died. Did it smell kinda sweet? Now that you mention it, yeah, like syrup or something. Why? Coolant leak, she said, matter of fact, pointing to a small, unnoticed puddle beneath the car. Cracked radiator hose, maybe. You're lucky the engine didn't seize. You try driving this another mile, you'd need a full rebuild. He blinked. She was right, and the puddle was visible now that she mentioned it. His pride fought the realization. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lena. Lena Carter." She extended a small, grease-stained hand. "Julian Reeves," he replied, shaking her hand more out of stunned politeness than anything. "I can patch it," she said, already applying a band of specialized tape with confident hands. "Just enough to get you to our shop downtown." As she brushed her hair away from her face, Julian's eyes caught something, a flicker of copper and green on the chain around her neck, the pendant. He leaned in unconsciously. The copper gear had a green glass center, and when the sun hit it just right, a faint inner spiral pattern shimmered within. Julian's heart stuttered. He had seen that pattern before, 12 years ago, in a different world before he became CEO, back when he had visited a small orphanage called Starlight Haven, a charity his father claimed to fund. There he met a girl, quiet, bright, and fascinated by the gears in his watch. He had gifted her the gear charm from his old project kit, saying it was from a broken time machine. He never saw her again. Days later, Starlight Haven was shut down permanently, allegedly due to fire code violations. No reports, no records, no follow-ups. He hadn't thought of it in years, until now. "Where'd you get that pendant?" he asked carefully. Lena glanced down. "This? It was my mom's, Nora Carter. She said it came from someone important. She died last year." "I'm sorry," Julian said automatically, but his voice faltered. Lena's expression didn't change. She had learned early that people get awkward around death. She always said it had a secret. Maybe one day I'd figure it out. Julian forced himself to smile. "May I offer you a ride? To thank you?" Lena hesitated, weighing every caution her aunt had drilled into her. "I won't bite," Julian added quickly, "and I promise I'll drop you right at your door." She nodded slowly, then climbed into the passenger seat. The car purred to life, still fragile but functional. The tape held. As they drove through town, Julian asked simple questions. Where did she live? What school did she attend? How long had she lived here? "I've been with Aunt Carla and Uncle Roy since last year," she said. "We've always lived here. I don't remember much before I was 3. Just bits and pieces." Julian tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Do you know if you were adopted?" Lena nodded. "Yeah. From a place called Starlight Haven. My mom said it closed right after." He nearly swerved off the road. "You okay?" she asked, looking up. "Yeah," he said, forcing his voice steady. "Yeah, just a memory. Haven't heard that name in a long time." They pulled up in front of a modest but well-kept yellow house. Carla stood on the porch, hands on hips, looking suspicious. Lena got out and waved. Julian followed slowly, still stunned. Before she left, he handed her a card. "If you ever need anything, repairs, supplies, whatever, call me." She took the card, studied it, then nodded. "Okay." He watched as she ran up the steps, the pendant gleaming like a forgotten truth. Julian didn't drive off right away. Instead, he sat frozen for a long moment, his breath shallow. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Ramirez," he said when the voice answered. "It's me. I need you to dig up everything you can on a girl named Lena Carter, and I need you to find out what the hell really happened at Starlight Haven." What Lena didn't know, as she opened the front door and vanished inside, was that her quiet act of kindness had just cracked open the lock on the secrets buried for more than a decade. Secrets that would soon unravel an empire, a legacy, and everything Julian Reeves thought he knew about his family. And it had all begun with a broken car and a copper gear. Julian Reeves sat alone in his penthouse office overlooking downtown Baltimore, the skyline glittering beneath a purpling evening sky. The city's lights flickered to life, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in the soft green shimmer of a gear-shaped pendant that haunted his thoughts like a whisper from another life. He hadn't been able to focus on work all week, not since meeting that girl, Lena Carter. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the gleam of the gear, the exact spiral pattern in the green center, the one he had given away over a decade ago at Starlight Haven. He swirled the ice in his untouched scotch and picked up a photograph on his desk. It was the only remaining image from that orphanage visit. He had been 25, just out of grad school, trying to prove to his father that he could be more than just the golden boy of Reeves Innovations. Back then, he didn't know about Project Helix or what the company was really doing with those kids. He only knew he'd met a bright, quiet girl, fascinated by his mechanical watch. He had unscrewed the back, taken out the gear, and handed it to her. "It's from a time machine," he had joked. "It'll bring you luck." 12 years later, that same gear had reappeared, hanging from the neck of a little girl with grease on her fingers and a voice full of calm certainty. Julian pulled out his phone. "Ramirez," he said when the call connected. "Tell me you've got something." "Plenty," came the gruff voice of his longtime private investigator. "The girl's full name is Lena Nora Carter, born around 2013, adopted by a woman named Nora Carter, nurse, single, no official adoption records, though." "No records?" Julian sat up straighter. "Not in the state system, not in federal. She just appears one day. Enrolled Lena in school, paid cash for everything, lived under the radar." Julian's stomach tightened. "What about Nora?" "Died in a car crash last year. Brakes failed. She was going downhill, no skid marks. The police ruled it mechanical error. But you don't believe that." "I believe in coincidences," Ramirez said. "But not when they stack like this." Julian pinched the bridge of his nose. He had grown up surrounded by manipulation, but this was something else. "What about Starlight Haven? Did we ever buy the property?" "Not we." Ramirez paused. "Your father did. Used a shell company. Got it for pennies after the orphanage shut down. Transferred it to a trust connected to Project Helix." The name landed like a stone in Julian's gut. Project Helix. The initiative he was told had been terminated, before he'd ever taken over. Ramirez continued. "Here's the kicker. That land is now the site of your company's new R&D facility. You know, the one testing bio-integrated AI systems." Julian froze. "The Helix complex." "Exactly. And there's more. I found blueprints, internal memos, and payment logs. Kids from Starlight weren't just relocated, they were reclassified. Experimental subjects." Julian sat in stunned silence, staring at the city he thought he understood. "I'm sending the files to your secure server," Ramirez said. "Oh, and there's something else. The girl, Lena. She's being watched." Julian's breath caught. "By who?" "No idea yet. Black SUV, out-of-state plates. Been circling her school and her house. She's not safe, Reeves. If what Nora tried to do was hide her, someone just figured it out." Julian's mind raced. Someone knew Lena was alive. Someone who hadn't given up. He ended the call and stood, heart pounding with a strange mix of fear and urgency. He thought of Lena's face, her calm, calculating stare as she patched his radiator. She had no idea who he was, or what had once been done to her. She didn't know that her pendant, her life, her story, were all threads in a larger web, a web spun by his father, by the very empire he now controlled. Meanwhile, across town in a quiet corner of their backyard garage, Lena was working under the warm hum of a halogen lamp. Her hands were covered in black grease as she rewired a broken old radio Roy had picked up from a junkyard. Tools hung neatly on pegboards above her, and the scent of motor oil mixed with lavender from Aunt Carla's nearby garden. The garage was Lena's sanctuary. Here, the world made sense. Wires obeyed her, circuits responded to her intuition. It was like music, a silent, ordered rhythm she could feel in her bones. Roy walked in, wiping his hands on a rag. That thing still breathing? Lena smiled and pressed a knob. The radio crackled, then lit up with the smooth voice of an old jazz singer. Fixed it. Roy let out a low whistle. One day, you're going to rebuild the whole world, kiddo. Lena shrugged. I just like fixing stuff. He stepped closer, noticing the card tucked into the corner of her workbench. Who's this from? She hesitated. Julian Reeves, the man with the Mustang. He gave me his card. Seemed weird when he saw my pendant. Roy went pale. Reeves? Lena nodded. He asked where I got the pendant. I told him it was from Mom. Roy's mouth tightened. He glanced toward the house, then back at her. I need to show you something. Inside, Carla had already pulled out a small box from beneath their bed. It was worn, wrapped in old lace and sealed with a strip of duct tape. Lena recognized it immediately. It was her mother's. She had never been allowed to open it. Roy sat down beside her. Your mom gave this to us before she died. Said to give it to you if someone from the Reeves family ever showed up. She knew they'd come. Lena stared at the box, heart thudding. With trembling fingers, she pulled away the tape and opened the lid. Inside lay a faded envelope with her name scrawled in Nora's neat handwriting. Beneath it were documents, photos, and something that looked like a USB drive molded to look like part of a child's toy. She opened the letter first. The paper crackled as she unfolded it. My dearest Lena, if you are reading this, it means someone has found you, someone connected to the people I spent the last 10 years running from. There are things you must know, things I hoped to tell you myself, but I guess fate had other plans. You were born into a lie, not a mistake, but a purpose. You are special. I don't just mean smart or talented. I mean different. They knew it. They tested for it. Starlight Haven was never just an orphanage. It was a lab dressed up like a charity. I was a nurse there. I saw what they did. I saw how they treated children like puzzles to be solved, not people to be loved. When I found out they were preparing to relocate you to something called Stage 2, I couldn't wait. I forged the papers. I ran with you. We changed our names. We hid. And I raised you the best I could. The pendant was from a visitor, a kind man. He never knew what his father had planned. But I always thought maybe one day he'd remember you, and maybe he'd help. Lena, you have to be strong now. You'll have questions I can't answer and dangers I can't protect you from. But if the gear still works, if the code inside hasn't been found, then maybe, just maybe, the truth can still be used for something good. Love always, Mom. Lena's hands trembled as she finished reading. Her world, safe, simple, mechanical, had just collapsed into something unknown. She looked at Roy and Carla, both silent, watching her carefully. "What's the gear?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Roy took a breath. "It's not just decoration. Your mom said it holds encrypted files, data from the orphanage, evidence." Carla placed a hand on Lena's. "She wanted you to know the truth, but only when you were ready." Lena's mind reeled. Nora had been hiding something her entire life, something dangerous enough to kill for. At that exact moment, on the other side of the city, Julian Reeves stood before his father in the Reeves family estate. Douglas Reeves was calm, sipping his bourbon near the fire. "So," Douglas said, not looking up, "you met the girl." Julian didn't answer. Douglas finally turned to face him. "She's alive, then. Damn that nurse. I thought we'd taken care of her." Julian's skin crawled. You knew she was alive. She's an anomaly, Julian, a valuable one. You have no idea what Project Helix was capable of." Julian clenched his fists. "She's a child. She's a key." Julian turned and walked out, heart pounding with disgust. He didn't know how or when, but he was certain now. He would protect Lena. From the shadows, from his father, from a legacy built on cruelty. He owed her that much. And somewhere in the dark, a clock began ticking again. Rain clattered gently against the small workshop's metal roof, creating a soothing rhythm that usually helped Lena think. But today, she sat frozen at her workbench, her hands limp in her lap, her copper pendant hanging heavy against her chest. The letter from her mother still lay open beside her, the edges curled and damp with her fingerprints. She had read it 3 times already, and still the words refused to settle into place. You were born into a lie. They treated children like puzzles. I ran to save you. Nothing in her young life had prepared her for this. Roy stepped into the workshop quietly, his tall frame outlined in the doorway. You okay? He asked softly. Lena didn't answer right away. Her fingers finally moved, reaching for the toy-shaped USB that Nora had hidden inside the box. Is it true? She whispered. Everything she wrote? Roy exhaled deeply. I didn't want it to be, but yes, your mom wasn't paranoid. She was terrified, and right to be. Lena finally turned to him. She said there were others, other kids like me. There were, Roy said, stepping closer. We don't know where they went. Some disappeared after Starlight shut down, some got adopted by people tied to the Reeves Foundation. Others just vanished. Why me? Lena asked, her voice cracking for the first time. Why was I so important? Roy crouched beside her and gently touched her wrist. Because you're gifted, Lena. More than anyone I've ever seen. You don't just fix machines, you understand them. Like they're speaking to you. I don't want to be gifted, she said, looking down. I just want to be left alone. He gave her a sad smile. That's not how the world works, kiddo. Not when people like Douglas Reeves know you exist. Lena stood up and grabbed the copper gear hanging from her neck. Then maybe I should disappear again, like Mom did. Before Roy could respond, the workshop light flickered. Not just a power surge, it pulsed in a pattern. 3 blinks. Pause. 3 more. Lena frowned and walked over to the breaker box. She opened it and immediately spotted the issue. A wire had been tampered with, not chewed by rats, cut, clean and deliberate. Her breath caught. Someone was here. Roy moved to her side, instantly on alert. You're sure? She nodded. No question. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number from memory, and waited. Ethan, it's Roy. We need to talk. It's about Starlight Haven and Lena Carter. Later that night, Ethan Cole arrived under the cover of darkness. He was tall, lean, and carried a camera bag slung across his chest. His reputation as an investigative journalist had earned him enemies, especially after his exposé on foster care corruption 2 years earlier. But this was something bigger. He listened intently as Lena told him what had happened. The car breakdown, the pendant, the letter. Roy handed him copies of the documents Nora had hidden, and Ethan's eyes widened as he scanned the pages. These are legit, he murmured. Medical records, data charts, progress logs. It's not just theory. They were testing you. IQ mapping, motor coordination, reflex studies, and this. He held up the toy-like USB. If this holds what I think it does, it could blow the whole thing open. Can you do something with it? Lena asked. Ethan nodded. I've got a guy. He's off-grid. If there's data in here, we'll crack it. Lena looked at him, her eyes searching his face. Why are you helping me? Because someone has to, he said simply. And because your mom helped me once, years ago. When I was just starting out, she passed me a note in a coffee shop. Told me about missing kids at Starlight. I didn't listen then. I won't make that mistake again. The next day at school, Lena tried to blend in. She walked the hallways like normal, sat through math class, and scribbled in the margins of her notebook. But she felt eyes on her, constantly. In gym class, a black SUV sat idling across the street. It wasn't one of the usual parents. The windows were tinted, and the engine never shut off. At lunch, her friend Jessa nudged her. Hey, who do you think those guys are? Lena didn't respond. When the final bell rang, Lena slipped out a side exit and ducked into the alley behind the science building. She took the long route home through the woods, heart racing the entire way. She didn't speak when she arrived, just locked the doors, pulled down the blinds, and waited for Roy and Carla. That evening, Julian Reeves stood on the balcony of his apartment with a folder in his hand and a phone pressed to his ear. "Ramirez?" he said. "I've read everything. She was never supposed to be a test subject." "Wasn't your call," Ramirez replied. "Your dad approved every name. Project Helix had levels. Tier 1 was surveillance. Tier 2 was active experimentation. Lena was listed as Tier 3. Julian's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means she wasn't just gifted," Ramirez said. "She was key. The central figure in a long-term cognitive enhancement trial. Your dad thought she could unlock an entire generation of neuroengineered talent." Julian felt sick. He hung up without saying goodbye. Back at the Carter house, Lena finally allowed herself to breathe as Ethan inserted the USB into his encrypted laptop. A green light blinked twice. Then a loading bar appeared. Within seconds, the screen filled with files. "Holy hell," Ethan whispered. "This is everything." The files contained video footage from inside Starlight Haven. Children in therapy rooms, tests involving memory puzzles, motor tasks, even remote control interfaces. Some of the logs were coded, others were raw audio files. One document listed a name next to each child, their assigned capability, and next to Lena's. Aptitude, Mechanical Systems Comprehension, Level Omega. Ethan clicked on a video. A younger Nora Carter appeared on screen, holding an infant Lena in her arms, looking into the camera with panic in her eyes. "If anyone finds this," Nora's voice trembled, "they're after her. Please, help her." The screen went black. Lena's chest tightened. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away. She couldn't fall apart, not now. "What do we do next?" she asked. Ethan straightened. "We go public." "That'll paint a target on her," Roy snapped. "She's already a target," Ethan shot back. "At least this way the story's out. The world will know." "No," Lena said suddenly. "Not yet. We need more. We need proof they're still watching, that they haven't stopped." They all turned to her, startled by the calm certainty in her voice. "I want to catch them. I want to know who they are, and I want to make sure they can't do this to anyone else." Roy stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You sound just like your mom," he whispered. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed with the copper pendant in her hand, rolling it between her fingers. She remembered the man in the Mustang, Julian Reeves. There was something in his eyes. Guilt. Not just surprise, but pain. Could he be the same boy her mom had mentioned in the letter? The one who had visited, offered kindness, then vanished? She opened her laptop and searched his name. Page after page came up. Corporate accolades, glossy photos, philanthropic donations, but nothing about Starlight Haven. Then she found it. A single blurry photo from 12 years ago, buried in a local newspaper's digital archive. A young Julian, smiling awkwardly, standing beside a Future Tech Initiative banner. Behind him, painted on the wall, was a mural Lena recognized from the background of her mother's photo albums. Starlight Haven. Her hands trembled. The next morning, a drone flew above the house. Roy spotted it and shot it down with his old pellet rifle. The micro camera was traced to a shell tech company based in Delaware. Julian's phone rang as he stood in the Reeves boardroom, trying to focus on quarterly numbers. It was Ramirez. "They're moving," the PI said. "Someone from inside your father's circle has dispatched a retrieval team. Target, Lena Carter, ETA, less than a week." Julian stood slowly. "This ends now," he said. And he began to plan. The night was quiet, too quiet for Roy's liking. He paced the living room, ears tuned to every creak of the house, eyes flicking to the street through the slats of the blinds. Across the road, the black SUV had returned, its engine idling under the faint yellow glow of a broken street lamp. It hadn't moved for hours. The men inside had made no attempt to approach, but Roy knew better than to think they were harmless observers. Upstairs, Lena sat cross-legged on the floor of her room, soldering tiny copper joints on the interior of what looked like a toy car. But it was no toy. The plastic shell concealed a homemade surveillance bug she and Ethan had improvised that afternoon. They had learned from the data dump Nora left behind that the Reeves surveillance team often used thermal drones and remote listening devices cloaked as local tech providers. If they were going to stay ahead, they had to fight back with the only tools they had: ingenuity and nerve. The copper pendant around her neck grew warm with her body heat. She no longer saw it as just a gift or a mystery. It was a trigger, the moment her life had split into before and after, and now she was walking into the after with her eyes wide open. Downstairs, Carla came in from the back porch, her phone still clutched tightly. "They just cut off our internet." Roy cursed under his breath. "They're closing in, trying to isolate us." Carla's voice trembled. "Should we run?" Lena appeared at the top of the stairs, still holding the shell of the surveillance car. "No," she said firmly. "They want us to panic. That's how they control people, like they controlled Mom." Ethan, hunched over his laptop in the kitchen, called out, "I've got something." Everyone crowded around him as he turned the screen toward them. "Meet Phase Echo. It's a Black Ops file buried under multiple encryptions in the Reeves archive. Took me 2 days to crack it." "What is it?" Carla asked. Ethan clicked a few folders open, revealing rows of names, photos, and coded designations. "It's a follow-up project after Helix was shut down officially. They renamed it Echo and decentralized the work to hide it from government oversight." Lena wasn't the only one. "Look," he highlighted 5 names: Milo Tan, Zara Ortiz, Elijah Moore, Thomas Ivers, and Project 17, Lena Carter. "Project 17?" Roy muttered. "They categorized the kids by their talents," Ethan said grimly. "Lena's mechanical aptitude made her the most valuable. That's why they kept looking after Nora Ran. She wasn't just a rogue employee. She stole what they saw as property." Lena stared at the screen, her heart hammering in her chest. "There's more," Ethan continued. "Each of these children was tracked after relocation. Some went missing. Some died in accidents. Lena was the only one they lost completely, until now." Roy stood straight. "So, what's the plan? We sit here and wait for them to snatch her?" "No," said Ethan. "We bring it to the surface." He clicked one final folder labeled Founders Council, Emergency Session. A grainy video loaded. It showed Douglas Reeves, older, colder than Julian, seated at the head of a long table, surrounded by men and women in suits. A timestamp dated the video 12 years ago. "The potential military applications are undeniable," Douglas said. "Cognitive acceleration, systems fluency, even emotional regulation. These children aren't just anomalies, they're assets. We must retain control, whatever the cost." The board nodded in grim agreement. Lena's fists clenched at her sides. "They were talking about me, like I'm a lab rat." "No," Ethan corrected gently. "They were talking about your gift, but they never understood it, and they never deserved it." At that moment, Roy's phone buzzed. A single text flashed on the screen. "Move now. They're coming. J.R." Roy's face went pale. "Julian. He warned us." Lena's voice was like steel. "Then we don't wait. We hit back." An hour later, Ethan, Roy, and Lena, a guide, were packed into Roy's old Chevy truck. Carla stayed behind, her heart heavy, to pack and disappear once they were gone. Ethan uploaded the Echo files to multiple encrypted cloud services. Lena clutched her pendant as they drove into the night, heading toward Baltimore. Their destination, the Reeves Foundation's annual Tech Gala, a black tie event hosted at the city's landmark skyscraper. It was public, high profile, and crawling with media. Exactly where they needed to be. Across town, in a hotel room cloaked in silence, Julian Reeves stood in front of the mirror adjusting his tie. But his thoughts were far away, buried under years of silence and guilt. When he was younger, he thought ambition was measured in awards and acquisitions. But tonight, he realized his real legacy would be measured by what he destroyed and what he dared to build in its place. He heard the alert on his phone. Lena and the others had arrived. Just in time. He descended to the gala floor. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over champagne flutes and murmuring elites. On stage, Douglas Reeves was already at the podium, charming a room full of donors and politicians. The Reeves Foundation is proud to unveil the future of artificial intelligence, neural mapping, and human performance augmentation. What we imagined in theory is now reality. Julian moved through the crowd, his heart pounding. Then, at the far entrance, Lena appeared. She wore a black hoodie, her pendant gleaming beneath it. Ethan followed with a camera slung over his shoulder. Roy walked beside them, chin high, arms protective. The crowd murmured at their presence. Douglas noticed, and for a flicker of a second, he froze. Then he recovered and forced a smile. It seems we have some young entrepreneurs joining us," he said into the microphone, trying to disarm the tension with humor. But Lena stepped forward. She held out her hand and opened the copper pendant. A small chip gleamed inside. "This," she said, her voice amplified by Ethan's live broadcast rig, "is your legacy, Mr. Reeves. The experiments, the cover-ups, the kids you tried to erase." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Julian stepped beside her. "I stand with her," he said simply. "And I'm done lying." He turned toward the cameras. "My father funded and directed illegal experimentation on gifted minors. Under the guise of charity, he built a machine that chewed up lives. I have the documents, the footage, and I'm cooperating fully with federal prosecutors." The room erupted. People surged forward. Reporters pushed in. Ethan's live feed hit 250,000 viewers in minutes. Douglas's mask cracked. "You think this ends me?" he barked, voice thick with rage. "You think a little girl in a washed-up heir can destroy me?" "No," Lena said softly. "But the truth will." Security moved to intervene, but Julian raised a hand. "They're guests," he told the guards, "and this is my building. Not his, not anymore." As the crowd turned, Douglas slipped away, disappearing into the back. But the damage was done. The story exploded across the country that night. Project Helix. Echo. Exploitation disguised as innovation. Federal agents raided Reeves Enterprises' private archives. Douglas went into hiding. Julian resigned as CEO and released every document he had. Victims' families began coming forward. Other children with abilities emerged. Their lives fractured, but their voices finally heard. Lena returned home under protection. She was no longer just a gifted girl hiding in a small town. She was a witness, a survivor, a force of change, and the world had started listening. The world changed overnight. It wasn't the kind of change you could see from a satellite image or chart on a graph, but a tremor, deep, cultural, irreversible, had begun the moment Lena Carter stood in front of that crystal chandelier-lit stage and revealed the copper gear's hidden truth. The live stream hit 1 million views within 12 hours. Overnight, Lena's name became a trending topic in every corner of the digital world. The girl with the copper gear. Some called her a hero. Others claimed she was a plant. A few conspiracy theorists insisted she was a fabricated AI herself. But the ones who mattered, the children still hidden, the ones silenced, the ones experimented on, they knew she was real. For Lena, though, reality was far less glamorous. The morning after the gala, she woke up in a safe-house apartment across the river. It wasn't home. No grease-stained tools, no warm, lavender-scented towels from Aunt Carla. Just beige walls, too many locks, and agents who stood outside the door like ghosts with badges. Ethan poured her a mug of cocoa. "You're officially a national witness now," he said, half proud, half worried. "Your testimony opened 3 federal investigations overnight. The DOJ, the Senate Subcommittee on Bioethics, and the Department of Child Welfare are all crawling over Reeves' files." Lena took the mug and cupped it with both hands. I didn't mean for it to get this big. You just told the truth, Ethan said. The rest grew because it needed to. Julian arrived a few hours later, no longer in a custom-tailored suit. He looked tired but lighter, like some enormous weight had cracked and slid off his shoulders. You okay? He asked her. Lena hesitated. I don't know. I keep thinking, what if they still win? What if it's not enough? Julian knelt beside her chair. Then we make it enough. Together. The hope in his voice was real, but in the background, danger hadn't disappeared. Just 3 days later, someone leaked the names of the other surviving Project Echo children. Milo Tan, Zara Ortiz, Elijah Moore, Tomas Ivers. The morning news ran their faces with bold titles like, Reeves Program, Where Are They Now? By nightfall, Thomas had vanished. His foster home was burned to the ground. No one knew where he'd gone. Julian stormed into a private meeting with federal agents. You were supposed to protect them, he barked. We underestimated the infrastructure your father put in place, one agent admitted. There are still loyalists, contractors, hired retrieval units. It's not just about shutting down the company. It's about unspooling a whole network. Meanwhile, Lena stood in the safe-house hallway, listening. Her grip tightened on the mug she held. We need to warn the others, she said quietly to Ethan. Now. Ethan already had a plan. That night, he, Roy, and Julian drove Lena to an undisclosed location in the countryside. A farmhouse, abandoned at first glance. But underground, it had been converted into a temporary shelter. 2 of the Project Echo kids had already arrived. Zara Ortiz was 16 and blind in one eye from a failed neural calibration. Her voice was sharp, her words sharper. I don't need your protection, she snapped when Julian offered assistance. What I need is justice. Elijah Moore was 15, soft-spoken and tall, with a mind for abstract mathematics and a stutter that worsened under stress. He barely looked anyone in the eye, but when Lena walked in, both of them stopped. You're the girl from the gear, Zara said. Lena nodded. And you're the ones they never wanted us to find. They sat in a circle that night and talked, really talked, for the first time. They shared stories of tests, of strange injections, of long interviews disguised as games. They remembered the white rooms and the whispered words. You're special. We're building a future together. I thought I imagined it, Elijah said at one point. I thought I was crazy. You're not, Lena whispered. We all lived it. We survived it. But surviving wasn't the same as healing. The next morning, a new threat arrived. Not in the form of men in suits or firebombs, but headlines. One of Douglas Reeves's loyalists had leaked fabricated footage to discredit Lena. It showed a girl who looked like her tampering with evidence, manipulating Julian, forging data. The networks exploded. Accusations followed. Some senators called her a fraud. Conspiracy channels speculated she was part of a smear campaign to take down innovation in biotech. And just like that, the tide shifted. Julian called his lawyer. We need a statement. We need proof of chain of custody for all the files. We need to move fast. But Lena wasn't waiting anymore. She stood up in front of the cameras Ethan set up in the farmhouse's old cellar and spoke directly to the world again. I'm not a hoax. I'm not a lie. I'm Lena Carter. My mother was Nora Carter. She died trying to protect me, and I will not let her death mean nothing. She held up the copper pendant again and twisted the gear to reveal the chip. This is not propaganda. This is memory. This is evidence. And it's not just mine, it's ours. Zara stepped forward. Then Elijah. One by one, survivors stood beside her. And behind them, Julian. This isn't just about one girl or one company, he said. This is about every system that allowed it, every law that looked away, every person who profited from silence. I was one of them. No more. The broadcast hit 5 million views in under 6 hours. Donations flooded into the new Survivor Protection Fund. More kids, hidden kids, emailed in from anonymous accounts saying, "I think I was one of them too." But even as the world turned back toward them with sympathy, another trap was being set. That night, under cover of darkness, a black van pulled up to the perimeter of the farmhouse compound. Inside were two men with night vision goggles and tranquilizer rifles. They never made it inside. Roy had built more than fences. He had rigged a series of motion sensor traps and cameras. The alert went off, waking Lena and the others. Julian was the first to react. "We're being breached." Roy grabbed his rifle. "Not today." But Lena did something unexpected. She ran to the central server in the control room and initiated a live stream. The screen flashed live footage of the men in black outside, rifles in hand. Ethan's voice came over the feed. "You're watching a real-time intrusion at a government-approved witness site for the Reeves investigation. If these men are yours, Mr. Reeves, come claim them." Within minutes, sirens wailed. The men were arrested. Their IDs traced back to a private contractor on Douglas Reeves's payroll. It was the final nail. The next day, Douglas Reeves was found in a chartered jet on the runway in Miami, attempting to flee the country. He was taken into custody, and the charges were read publicly: child endangerment, unlawful human experimentation, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and attempted witness tampering. Lena watched the footage in silence. Julian stood beside her. "It's over," he said softly. "No," she said. "It's beginning." And she meant it. Because now, they weren't hiding anymore. Now, they were building something. The courtroom was silent. Unnervingly so, as Lena Carter stepped up to the witness stand. Her small figure was dwarfed by the mahogany walls, the high ceiling, the rows of cold, dispassionate eyes watching her every move. Yet, she stood with a quiet dignity that made even the judge straighten a little taller. The copper gear pendant hung just below her collarbone, the symbol that had become a national headline now gleaming under the courtroom lights. This wasn't a trial for fame or pity. It was about truth. She looked across the courtroom and locked eyes with the man who had haunted her mother's final days. Douglas Reeves, seated in the defendant's chair, wearing an immaculate gray suit and a mask of civility so carefully arranged it almost looked natural. But Lena had seen what he was behind it, and soon the world would too. The prosecuting attorney rose. "Lena, do you understand why you're here today?" She nodded. "To tell the truth." He gave her a small, respectful smile. "Then go ahead." Lena took a deep breath. "My name is Lena Carter. I'm 12 years old. When I was 3, my mother, Nora Carter, rescued me from an orphanage called Starlight Haven. She said we had to run, that people were watching, that they would come for me one day. She gave me this pendant and told me never to lose it. I didn't know until after she died that it held files, records, about what they did to us." She paused. The room held its breath. "I wasn't the only one. There were others. Kids like me, smart, different. They tested us. They called it research, but it was never about helping us. It was about control, about profit. I didn't understand it then, but I do now." The judge's gavel clicked softly. The defense attorney stood, already flipping open his folder. "Miss Carter, do you have any actual memory of the testing itself?" "I remember white walls," Lena said evenly. "I remember being asked to fix things, to take apart machines and put them back together. I remember cold hands and bright lights, and I remember feeling like I was a thing, not a person. But you were very young, weren't you? Isn't it possible your memories have been influenced?" Lena didn't flinch. "My memories are mine, and the files prove everything." The court clerk entered the data into evidence. Photos, videos, transcripts. And, finally, the footage of Douglas Reeves from the Echo files giving orders to retain control over cognitive test subjects at all costs. The courtroom shifted. The mask on Douglas's face cracked just a fraction. Julian sat at the back, watching Lena with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. He remembered the first time he saw her. Just a grease-stained girl fixing his car. How far she had come, and how far he still had to go to earn the right to stand beside her. After court adjourned for the day, Julian approached Lena on the courthouse steps. "That was remarkable," he said softly. She looked up at him, her face calm. "We're not done yet." "No," he agreed. "We're not." The next week saw wave after wave of witnesses. Former employees of Reeves Enterprises came forward. Some were remorseful, others defiant. A few, like Dr. Helena Voss, the lead psychologist on Project Helix, had cut immunity deals in exchange for full testimony. They wanted obedience, not potential, Dr. Voss testified. "We were instructed to suppress free will in the children. They were assets, not individuals." Lena Carter was designated as Tier Omega, final stage prototype. Her abilities with mechanical systems were unprecedented. "Why was she never processed?" the prosecutor asked. "Her mother took her, just disappeared." It set off panic internally. Mr. Reeves considered her a containment breach. In the gallery, Roy clenched his jaw. Carla wiped away tears. The most damning moment came during cross-examination, when the prosecution introduced video footage from a Reeves board meeting, one that had been previously encrypted and only recently decrypted by federal tech teams. On screen, Douglas Reeves calmly discussed contingency plans for eliminating whistleblowers. "If the nurse resurfaces, we bury her. Quietly. The girl will be harder to find, but we'll keep eyes on the Carter relatives." A gasp echoed through the room. The prosecution rested its case. Douglas's defense team tried every card in the book, questioning Lena's credibility, blaming rogue employees, citing national security clauses. But the mountain of evidence was too high. The chain of harm too well documented. The public had turned. Even corporate allies had begun to jump ship. And then, in a dramatic turn, the court called Julian Reeves to the stand. He walked slowly, head high. When he sat, he stared straight ahead. "You're the son of the defendant, Mr. Reeves?" "Yes." "You're also the former CEO of Reeves Enterprises?" "I was." "Can you tell us what you discovered upon investigating Project Helix and Echo?" Julian's voice was measured, steady. "I found evidence of unlawful human experimentation on minors. I found that my father had repurposed charity orphanages into talent acquisition farms. And I found proof that he knew what he was doing was unethical and illegal, and chose to do it anyway." Douglas's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward in his seat, but said nothing. "And did you aid in covering up any of this?" Julian hesitated. "No," he said, "but I looked away, and that made me complicit." "And why did you choose to testify now?" Julian glanced at Lena. "Because I met someone who reminded me what integrity looks like." Lena's throat tightened, but she said nothing. After court dismissed that evening, the entire Carter family, along with Julian and Ethan, gathered in a quiet corner of the city park. The news crews had gone. The cameras were off. It was just them, family by blood, by bond, by survival. "You did it," Roy said softly. Lena shook her head. "We did." Ethan tossed her a thumb drive. "The DOJ is launching a national task force to identify and support all former Project Echo survivors. Your files helped build it. They're calling it the Carter Initiative." Lena blinked. "You're kidding." Julian smiled. "You changed the system. Not just for yourself, for everyone." But it wasn't celebration that filled Lena that night. It was stillness. A quiet knowing that the road ahead would still be long, but it would be hers. A week later, the verdict came in. Douglas Reeves was found guilty on all 17 counts. The judge's sentence was harsh and precise. Life in federal prison without parole. The courtroom burst into applause. Tears fell. Hugs were exchanged. But Lena didn't cry. She just sat still, staring at the man who had once tried to shape her fate from the shadows. As the bailiff led Douglas away in handcuffs, he turned to her, his expression unreadable. Lena met his eyes. "You always thought you were building the future," she said, loud enough for only him to hear. "But the future belongs to the ones you couldn't break." He looked away. The copper gear glinted in the light as Lena stepped outside, the city buzzing with reaction. It was over. No, not over. It had begun. 5 years later, the sun rose gently over what had once been the scorched remains of a lie, a field of forgotten earth that used to house secrets buried beneath the pristine facade of philanthropy. But now, in its place stood the gleaming new structure of the Carter Center for Young Innovators, its glass panels catching the morning light like a beacon. It wasn't just a building, it was a revolution made of bricks, wires, code, and dreams. It was Lena Carter's answer to everything they tried to erase. The courtyard buzzed with energy as students in the lab coats and tool belts darted between engineering pods and classrooms. Here, age didn't define authority. Talent did. A 12-year-old could lead a coding lab. A 15-year-old might supervise a robotics arm test. Ideas moved faster than bells, faster than labels, and certainly faster than any stereotype about where genius could come from. Lena stood at the east wing balcony, surveying it all. Now 15, she had grown taller, but her spirit had always outpaced her body. Her once wild braids were tied into a practical bun, and her usual hoodie had been replaced by a simple white button-down dusted with grease from a morning spent helping recalibrate the new AI-guided 3D printer. Around her neck, as always, hung the copper gear pendant. It had changed nothing and yet everything. No longer a mystery, no longer a curse, just a symbol of resistance, of resilience, of rebuilding. Julian walked beside her, now in jeans and rolled sleeves. The sharpness in his voice had softened over the years, his power no longer measured in net worth but in lives uplifted. He had sold nearly everything: real estate, investments, patents. The wealth he once hoarded had been repurposed into the Prometheus Initiative, a foundation funding centers like this all over the country, particularly in places the system had overlooked for generations. "I still get chills every time I walk through that gate," he admitted, nodding to the stone-carved words at the entrance. "Every talent deserves to flourish. Every child deserves freedom." "You helped make it happen," Lena replied without looking at him. Julian shook his head. "You did. I just followed." Lena offered a half smile and leaned against the balcony. "It's not done yet. It never really will be." Down below, Uncle Roy strolled through the courtyard, now head of the engineering mentorship program. His voice, still gravelly, carried through the space as he demonstrated how to build a self-stabilizing drone using only scrap parts and open-source code. Beside him, Carla helped guide a group of younger students toward the innovation labs. Though her knees had begun to ache in the mornings, her mind remained sharp. She now ran the center's student wellness program, ensuring that healing minds mattered as much as creating brilliant ones. Inside the lobby, a towering mural stretched 3 stories high. It was a timeline of resistance and rebirth. The faces of the children from Project Echo, headlines from the trial, the copper pendant blown up to 10 times its size. At its center was a quote from Lena herself. "Broken systems don't fix themselves. They have to be redesigned, from the ground up." Ethan stood near the mural with a documentary crew, now producing a full-length film titled The Girl with the Copper Gear. He caught Lena's eye and gave her a discreet thumbs up. The documentary had already been optioned for international release. Lena had refused profit. Every cent was going into survivor grants. As she walked the halls that day, students stopped her, not to gawk, not to idolize, but to ask real questions. About circuitry, about ethical AI, about their next prototype. She always answered with the same energy, the same spark. At lunch, Zara Ortiz joined her under the oak tree planted in the central courtyard. It had grown tall and wide since the opening of the center. Zara, now 21, was completing her degree in neurotech and spent half her time mentoring students, half working with the Carter Initiative to track down more victims and rebuild legal identities for those still in hiding. "They're releasing the final batch of declassified files today," she said between bites of her sandwich. "Anything new?" Lena asked. 2 more facilities, one in Nevada, one in Romania. And get this, both were disguised as language academies. Lena's eyes narrowed. How many? Zara shook her head. Still counting, but the initiatives team is on it. We're getting better at finding them. For a long moment they sat in silence, the kind that stretches between those who share survival without needing to name it. Then Zara pulled something from her bag. A letter. It's from Milo. Lena's chest tightened. She hadn't heard from him in years, not since he left the safe house. Some survivors disappeared by choice. Too much to relive, too much to explain. She unfolded the note and read in his tidy mathematical handwriting. Lena, I've been living quietly in Alaska, working on off-grid tech. You'd love it. I saw your interview last week. You looked strong, like someone who rewired the whole world. You gave me the courage to stop hiding. I think I'm ready to come back. Thank you for keeping the light on. Milo. Lena folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. Her fingers brushed the copper gear. At that moment, a new alert chimed on her tablet. Another application had come in, this one from a young girl in Mississippi, 12 years old, orphaned, IQ in the 160s, built her own weather balloon using duct tape and Arduino boards, wanted nothing more than to study mechanics but had been suspended for taking apart the school's fire alarm. Lena smiled. Let's get her here, she said. Later that evening, as dusk turned the sky lavender, the center hosted its 3rd annual Innovation Festival, a community showcase where young inventors presented their work to peers, mentors, and local leaders. Lena stood backstage, watching a group of 10-year-olds explain a portable water purification device built from recycled plastics. Their faces glowed with excitement, their voices trembling with the thrill of being heard. Julian joined her, handing her a microphone. You ready for your closing speech? She looked out at the crowd. Hundreds had gathered. Families, students, educators, activists. I think I've been ready for a long time, she said. When she stepped on stage, the crowd erupted into applause, but she quieted them with a single raised hand. 5 years ago, she began, I stood in a courtroom and told the world what had been done to me and so many others. I thought that was the bravest thing I would ever do, but it wasn't. She paused. The bravest thing is rebuilding. It's waking up each day, choosing not to live in fear and believing that you can shape the world differently than the one that tried to break you. She pointed to the audience. That's what you're doing. Every code you write, every invention you sketch on napkins, every time you refuse to be told what you can't be, you're rebuilding the world. The copper gear around her neck shimmered in the lights. My mother taught me that broken machines can be fixed. But broken systems, systems that exploit, dehumanize, or silence the most brilliant among us, they have to be reimagined. We're doing that. Right here, right now. She stepped back, the stage lights warming her face. And when the festival concluded, fireworks lit up the sky above the Carter Center. Not for spectacle, but for memory, for Nora, for every child who didn't get a second chance. Lena watched them, hand resting on her pendant, heart steady. The world hadn't just turned, it had evolved. On a quiet spring morning, sunlight spilled gently across the polished marble floor of the Johnson Auditorium, where rows of young inventors, families, teachers, and dignitaries had gathered to celebrate the first official graduating class of the Carter Center for Young Innovators. Colorful banners hung from the ceiling beams, each one stitched with the names of students who had completed the 2-year program. The stage shimmered with pride and promise, not of wealth or prestige, but of possibility. Lena Carter stood off stage, watching from the wings, her fingers curled loosely around the edge of the curtain. At 15, she was still too young to graduate herself, but everyone knew she was the center's beating heart. Her face had graced newspapers and legislation, documentaries and town halls. But it was here, among buzzing circuits and scuffed toolboxes, that she truly belonged. She exhaled deeply as her name was called. Not as a graduate, but as a mentor, a builder, a survivor. As she walked across the stage, the applause swelled, not polite or perfunctory, but visceral, an outpouring of gratitude for the girl who had refused to let her story end in silence. She adjusted her microphone and took in the crowd. Uncle Roy and Aunt Carla seated proudly in the front row, Ethan, camera in hand, ready to capture the moment. Julian near the back, arms crossed but eyes warm. And scattered throughout the audience, Zara, Elijah, Milo, and dozens of other former Echo children who had emerged from the shadows to reclaim their futures. Lena's voice, when it came, was steady. "When I was 10 years old, I fixed a stranger's car on the side of the road," she began, the hint of a smile curling at her lips. "I didn't know then that the car belonged to a man whose family had once tried to control children like me. I didn't know that the gear around my neck held secrets, or that helping him would lead to unraveling a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of power." The room was silent, hanging on every word. I didn't do it alone. I had people who believed in me, who listened when I didn't have all the words, who saw value in something other than test scores or resumes. People like my mother, Nora, like Roy and Carla, like Julian Reeves, like the friends I met along the way who reminded me I wasn't broken. I was underrated. Lena paused, letting the words breathe. When everything came crashing down, when we brought down an empire built on exploitation, there was a moment when I thought justice would be enough, that if we got the bad guys, the story would be over. She shook her head gently. But justice is just the beginning. The real work is rebuilding. And we've done that here, not perfectly, not easily, but honestly. We've learned together, we've failed together, and we've created something bigger than any one of us. She looked at the graduates, a mix of students from across the country, some formerly homeless, some neurodiverse, some once written off entirely by the systems that were supposed to support them. "You are not here because someone gave you a handout," she said. "You're here because you proved, again and again, that brilliance comes in 1,000 forms, because you showed the courage to be curious in a world that often tries to quiet you." The copper gear around her neck gleamed under the lights. "My adoptive mother used to say, 'Broken machines can be fixed, but broken systems, they have to be redesigned.' That's what we're doing. One invention, one idea, one voice at a time." As she stepped down, the applause rose again. The graduates tossed their symbolic caps, custom-made circuit boards, into the air. The clatter as they fell echoed through the auditorium like the sound of a new era being born. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the Carter Center's garden, Lena sat on a stone bench under the oak tree. The center's first building had been built around this tree, preserved at her request. Its roots, she'd once said, reminded her of truth. Deep, unseen, but impossible to kill. Julian joined her, carrying 2 iced teas. He passed one to her without a word. They sat in silence for a long time. "I got a letter this morning," Lena finally said, sipping. "From Victoria Reeves." Julian arched a brow. "My sister?" "She works with the federal prosecutor's office now. Been pushing the initiative to expand Echo investigations abroad. She says they found 5 more facilities." Julian exhaled slowly. 5. "They've rescued 37 children so far," Lena added. "Some with talents like mine. Others, different. She says they'd like to meet me, when I'm ready." Julian nodded, thoughtful. "Are you ready?" "I think I need to be," Lena replied. There was no fear in her voice, just quiet purpose. She reached into her pocket and unfolded the letter. Roy, Carla, and Ethan soon joined them, and together, Lena read aloud. "To Lena Carter, because of you, doors have opened that were once sealed in concrete and silence. Because of you, children are being given names again, identities, freedom, and a future. You asked once if this could be enough. I'm telling you, it already is. But if you want more, there's more work to be done. I'll be here, ready when you are. With respect, Victoria Reeves." A hush fell over the group, the kind of silence that doesn't come from emptiness, but from wholeness. "Ironic, isn't it?" Julian said after a moment. "My father spent his whole life trying to build a legacy, and he did. Just not the one he expected." Lena looked out across the campus grounds where students were still gathered, laughing, tinkering, dreaming. "Legacy was never supposed to be about power," she said softly. "It was always supposed to be about people." That evening, as the last light faded and the Carter Center glowed with lanterns lit by solar panels the students had designed themselves, Lena stood before the new sign at the front entrance. It had been unveiled at the graduation, but only now, in the quiet, did she feel its full weight. Every talent deserves to flourish. Every child deserves freedom. Etched beneath it, in smaller font, were the names of the Project Echo survivors who had lived to rebuild, and next to them, the names of those who hadn't. Lena traced her mother's name, Nora Carter, with her fingertips. Then she turned and walked back toward the light, toward the sound of music and laughter and hope, toward the world she had helped to remake. Not perfect, not easy, but real, and real, she had learned, was powerful enough. Lena Carter's journey reminds us that the most powerful revolutions don't always start in courtrooms or on battlefields. They often begin in the quiet courage of one person choosing to do the right thing. A young girl with a toolkit and a mysterious pendant didn't set out to change the world. She simply acted out of instinct, kindness, and an unwavering belief in fixing what's broken. And in doing so, she uncovered a web of corruption, injustice, and buried truths that others had tried for years to hide. But more than exposing darkness, Lena's legacy lies in what she built afterward. A space where talent thrives regardless of background, a community where healing is as important as achievement, and a system redesigned from the inside out. Her story teaches us that justice isn't complete unless it leads to restoration, and that trauma, when met with resilience and support, can transform into purpose. It also reminds us that age doesn't determine impact. Lena was just a child when she spoke truth to power, and yet her voice shook the foundations of an empire. Everyone has the capacity to lead, to inspire, and to rebuild, even if they start from nothing. So ask yourself, what systems around you are broken? What can you help fix? Because every voice matters. Every talent deserves a chance. And sometimes the smallest act of repair becomes the spark for something extraordinary. Where are you watching from today? We'd love to know. If Lena's story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another powerful true story that inspires, heals, and reminds us all of the strength we carry inside. Welcome to the community. Welcome to change.